This is a Fox News alert, a guilty verdict for a TV icon.
Son?
Yeah, Dad.
There's no music coming through the headset. You still bopping to what's left in your brain?
Bill Cosby rose to superstardom in the 1980s as America's dad. Today, he was convicted on all 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault in his retrial for a crime committed in 2004. Cosby remains free on bail until his sentencing. Let's bring in Fox's Brian Yennis. He's live outside the courthouse in Norristown, Pennsylvania with the details. Brian.
Hi, Dana. Well, Bill Cosby, America's dad, is now a convicted felon. The jury of 7 men and 5 women deliberated for 14 hours and found him guilty on all 3 felony accounts. Now, rendering this guilty verdict a big shock to many people out here. He now faces up to 30 years in prison. Now, Bill Cosby left the courtroom defiantly with his fist up in the air. It was almost as though he was acquitted, but we've seen this before. Inside the courtroom, though, it was a completely different story. Bill Cosby sat stoically as the verdict of guilty was read by the jury. Andrea Constand, the accuser, she sat there also stoically, but then it all changed in a remarkable moment when Bill Cosby lashed out inside the courtroom, calling the district attorney an a-hole for trying to revoke his bail, saying that Cosby could have has the ability and the means to leave. They took away his passport and they, in fact, kept his bail. A remarkable moment inside that courtroom. Meantime, Andrea Constand, she accused Bill Cosby of sexually assaulting her at his home in 2004. This case came down to the issue of consent. Did the jury believe Andrea Constand or did they believe Bill Cosby? There wasn't a lot of physical evidence in this case, but the case was mainly about Andrea saying that Bill Cosby gave her 3 blue pills and then sexually assaulted her. The jury, obviously with this guilty verdict, believing Andrea that she did not give Cosby consent. After 2 trials and 14 years since this happened in 2004, the DA praised her courage.
We have shown from our record that money and power, or who you are, will not stop us from a criminal investigation or prosecuting a case. And what was revealed through this investigation was a man who had spent decades preying on women that he drugged and sexually assaulted.
Now, last summer, this case ended in a mistrial, a hung jury. But in this retrial, a big difference for the prosecution was the judge allowing the testimony of 5 other accusers who had accused Bill Cosby over the years. This helped the prosecution set Cosby up to show that he had a pattern of behavior. Well, Cosby's defense attorney, Tom Mesereau, well, he spoke after and said that they vow to appeal.
We are very disappointed by the verdict. We don't think Mr. Cosby's guilty of anything, and the fight is not over. Thank you.
Are you going to appeal, sir?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, very strongly.
A sentencing hearing still needs to be set in terms of the date. Again, he faces a maximum of 30 years in prison. He likely will not get that 30 years, but he will likely spend the rest of his days in prison. The comic legend, 80 years old, and now a convicted felon. Dana.
All right, Brian, thank you so much. And we have Kimberly Guilfoyle here, who has tried these types of cases. You're going to explain this all to us, but as I understand it, the real determining factor was this idea of the other crimes evidence and allowing other people to come in and talk about it.
Yeah, and prosecutors, when we use that kind of evidence in cases called prior bad acts, that's sort of like the colloquial terminology. And what it is, it's evidence of other people coming forward to say that the defendant acted in a way similar with them in terms of like modus operandi, the way that they behaved. In terms of Bill Cosby, in this case, they had to look for other instances of victims and witnesses to come forward that would be very similar in nature to this particular case and what this victim alleged happened to her, which is a pattern and practice of drugging, for the purposes of committing a sexual assault. And in this case, it was alleged that Benadryl was used to try to put her out under a, and it makes it very difficult because when you're in a case like this and somebody does this, you prey on another individual, you use something like that so because they won't be able to really recall, recollect, or be able to testify against you or perhaps even identify when you hear of cases like roofing at clubs, etc. It's particularly heinous because you're picking on a vulnerable victim to do that in the hopes that they won't be able to identify you, in the hopes that you'll be able to do it again so that you can prey on more victims. And one of the things in this case, Bill Cosby will be identified and assessed as a sexual predator. They'll do an assessment and present that to the judge at the time. So all those other pieces of evidence and information that came forward, they're going to put that forward to determine whether or not he should be categorized like that and, of course, register as a sex offender.
At 80 years old.
At 80 years old and 2 years later.
My other question for you, and then we'll take it around the table, is when his lawyers say that they're definitely going to appeal, do you think that they would try to appeal on the grounds about this judge and his discretion of allowing this evidence in?
Yes, because you have a big pre-trial, a hearing, and you brief the matter to say this is who we want to bring in. And they tried to bring in some 14 women to come forward. And the judge said, well, I will allow these 5 because they are probative versus too prejudicial to the defendant. Because you really have to balance that because it's really ripe for appeal for someone to bring that forward. But this has been something that as prosecutors that I've done as, prosecuting sexual assault cases, really fought hard to get this to be evidence on the books because it is so compelling. In a case like this where you didn't have, DNA or you didn't have a recipient eyewitness there to say what happened to her, it's her word against his. That's why this other evidence is compelling to say, wait a second, someone's willing to take the stand, take an oath, and tell you that the same type of thing happened to them. Some of these women were precluded from having justice in their individual case because of the statute of limitations has run, but they were still there to tell the truth and subject to cross-examination. That will be the linchpin of Mesereau's appeal, which will probably take about 2 years before that comes to light.
Right, and earlier today you were reminding people, I just want to warn everyone, he's not going to jail in a couple of weeks. It
no,
could be
and he's out on bail now, pretty much to stay in his house. They took away his passport because they say it could be a flight risk. When you think of people like Roman Polanski or you think Harvey Weinstein, when you have someone of means and recourse that can charter a private jet and take off and never be heard from again, the judge made sure that wasn't going to happen in this case.
Juan, I turn to you for either a comment or a question for Kimberly.
No, I mean, so Cosby's someone I know pretty well, and, to me, Cosby's guilt was less in question because he's someone who had admitted that he was buying Quaaludes, now an illegal drug, for the purpose of partying and to give them to women. And then the question was whether or not that kind of thing would be allowed in. It was allowed in both trials that were heard. The difference in this one, as Kimberly was saying, is that you had the additional testimony that created it for the jury, the impression of a pattern of abusive behavior. And I think that whereas there was an attempt to undermine Andrea Constand, the principal person here charging Cosby, as someone who was a con artist, in the words of Mr. Cosby's defense attorney, who was just simply trying to make money off a very rich, famous man, here came people who said, you know what, I was just hoping that he was going to be a father figure, that he was going to help me with my career. I did not understand that this was what he was after. And in possibly one of the most chilling moments from the trial, there was a young woman who was 17 at the time. Her name was Chilan Lasha. And she says in open court, "You remember me, don't you, Mr. Cosby?" And it was like, oh my God. She was 17 at the time, and here she is now staring him in the face and saying it. That's pretty compelling if you're sitting there as a juror and to say, what is she getting out of it? She's no con artist. In addition, remember, Cosby had paid $3 million to Constand in a civil case. So to some extent, he had admitted some culpability on that level. But I just want to close on this thought, Dana, which is, he was America's dad, as you said in the opening. And the reason that I know him so well is I was writing a book about the fact that he was saying to the black community, hey, you know what? There are different ways to look at social progress and what's going on in our community. Why aren't we taking a stand against the drug dealers? Why aren't we saying something about holding black families together? Why don't we say something about our responsibility in terms of high rates of violent crime? And it was so interesting that the judge in the first case, that maybe before the first case, said, I'm going to allow in all this evidence about Cosby because he thinks he's such a moralist. He's lecturing other people. So if he said in deposition that he was buying Quaaludes, let it be public for the big moralist. Boy, it came back to bite him big time.
Greg, I don't know if you had a question for Kimberly or if you wanted to talk about anything in particular.
Well, I guess everybody's kind of covered the angles that you'd expect. I mean, if I hear the phrase America's dad again, you know, we get it. It's a surprise. But remember, these are characters, fictitious characters. There are real people that play those roles, and sometimes they're just not good people. But I think we always kind of go, well, okay, we're so surprised. But if you look around in history and you look at a lot of entertainers, a lot of them do play wholesome characters. There was a Jimmy Savile in England who was a big entertainer of children, and turned out he was a disgusting molester. Mike, I have a side question that I'm just curious. What happens to The Cosby Show, something that was probably one of the most successful shows ever in syndication? You know, it's like when you watch The Naked Gun and OJ's in it. You can't really watch it the way you used to watch it. So when you watch The Cosby Show, when you're looking at it, it changes the way you look at something, and I wonder if that's just a show that kind of just goes away.
Yeah,
well,
Megan
they
just said in my ear that one
withdrew
station already
I figured that would
canceled it. I'm not wild, Jesse, about taking jury verdicts as political statements because I think jury verdicts are based on evidence of a crime, but it's sort of inevitable today that that's what happened.
If you look at it in the context of the Me Too movement, Greg's always talked about the stratosphere of guilt. It's very clear that Bill Cosby is on the far end of that stratosphere. He's in a Harvey Weinstein situation because, as you said, the predatory type behavior, the Quaaludes, and he was mixing the Quaaludes with alcohol in a grooming process and over a pattern over the course of, I think, since the 1960s. He's actually still pending a civil lawsuit in, I think, Los Angeles County at the Playboy Mansion, where he allegedly molested a teenage girl there at the Playboy Mansion. So that's still pending. So, you know, he's looking at a pretty tough next couple of years. When you see someone that started out, I mean, as a kid, it's kind of bewildering because I grew up with Cosby, and you see all these other talented people with these dark sides, and you don't really know how to reconcile that. But this guy really deserves it, I believe. He starts with Fat Albert, and then you have Mr. Huxtable. At one point, he was making $4 million an episode with The Cosby Show. A huge crossover appeal racially, commercial appeal. You know, he had the pudding, Coca-Cola, a lot of endorsement deals. At one point, he was worth $400 million. And when Hannibal Buress, the comic, did a little stand-up routine in Philadelphia and joked that he was a rapist, it all came crashing down. And at one point, I think almost 60 women came forward since the 1960s and said he did something to them. And then you have TV Land pull the syndication deal. You had NBC pull out of their deal. And the money dried up. The tour dates collapsed. And now he's probably going to rot in jail or die in jail. And it's just a sad ending to the legacy. But at the same time, you just really want to pour your heart out to all the women who were victims of this man. And I guess they had their day in court and justice was served.
Kimberly, they want me to tease, but I did want to ask you what you could expect at a sentencing hearing. Okay,
so at a sentencing hearing, they're going to do the assessment of Mr. Cosby and really do a deep dive into his back. They're going to do like background, social, psychological assessment, and the defense will be able to present witnesses or evidence on his behalf. But you will also hear from victim impact statements about what they did to him, and similar to the gymnastics case with Dr. Larry Nassar, and going forward with that we actually saw the women come forward. Michaela Maroon, who I did an event with recently, was one of the women that testified. So, and also what I think is important here, he should have to pay, not for just like the crimes that he committed, but for the cost of the prosecution. And he made light of the $3.5 million is nothing. So the prosecution in this case is going to be asking for the defendant to reimburse the state for the price of prosecuting this case, which was quite extensive.
All right. Thank you, Kimberly, for the expertise. President Trump has some harsh words for Democrats after his pick to lead the VA withdraws his nomination over allegations of misconduct. You'll hear from the president next.
Everybody's wondering and wanting to know what's your name, who's that girl? They're watching you. They see you.
He's no longer the VA secretary nominee. Dr. Ronnie Jackson withdrew from consideration this morning. He maintains the allegations against his character are fabricated, but says they have become a distraction, so he will no longer pursue the position. President Trump eviscerated Democrats for taking down his pick.
He's an admiral, highly respected, a real leader. And I watched what Jon Tester of Montana, a state that I won by like over 20 points, really, they love me and I love them. And I want to tell you that Jon Tester, I think this is going to cause him a lot of problems in his state. These are all false accusations that were made. These are false. They're trying to destroy a man. By the way, I did say welcome to Washington, welcome to the swamp, welcome to the world of politics.
Sure.
But for Jon Tester to start bringing up stuff like Candyman and the kind of things he was saying, and then say, well, these are just statements that are made.
Right.
There's no proof of this. And he has a perfect record. He's got this beautiful record, unblemished. I don't think people in Montana, the admiral is the kind of person that they respect and admire, and they don't like seeing what's happened to him.
The president also sounding off about the obstruction of many of his nominees.
They're very upset because Mike Pompeo, who was, again, first in his class at West Point, top in his class at Harvard Law School, a brilliant guy, a great guy, and somebody I get along with very well. Mike got through, and they thought they had him stopped. The Democrats are obstructionists. It's horrible what they're doing. It's a disgrace. In fact, they had a report the other day that at this rate, it'll be 9 years before they're allowed to come into government. So you have people that have given up everything. They've given up their jobs. Top-line people, brilliant people. They want to come in and help us in government. And Chuck Schumer and the group take, years to approve them, years.
So on. Does the president have a point when he says that these are unnamed, unsourced allegations? A lot of them are criminal, some of these allegations. They're blind and that kind of nasty, and this was able to derail a nomination. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's fair that you have people come forward and feel they can trust their elected representatives, in this case the senators, to tell them what's going on. And what we know from Senator Tester of Montana is that these were mostly military people who were coming forward with the complaint. So I don't know exactly how political. I think there's lots of politics around the Veterans Administration at this moment. But what we can see right now is that, to me, the sort of blinding fact is not obstruction, but the lack of experience and lack of qualifications for Dr. Jackson.
What?
He had no experience managing a large bureaucracy. He had no experience with the Veterans Administration. And there's questions about the amount of vetting that he went through by the Trump White House before the nomination was made. It looked like it was largely based on the fact that Trump got along with him.
Well, people say that they've had a lot of very qualified people running big, large organizations at the VA before, and the VA has not performed up to task, Kimberly. What do you think about the president's use of obstruction? It sounds like it's been poll tested, and I think he believes that word works very well.
Yes, he poll tested it with himself, and he likes it, and I think it's true, and it works. And it is. They're acting like obstructionists. They're really only hurting the fine men and women that serve in the military and the veterans that come back that really want to get some quality medical care and health care, and they want somebody that they can, look up to and be able to make sure that they can get the services they need. Well, if the bureaucrats and the people with managerial experience had done such a fine job before, why is the VA in such shambles? Perhaps it was right to take a fresh look at somebody that was trusted over 12 years, taking care of one of the most powerful people in the country, former presidents and the current president, who served admirably. Okay, this is someone who served his country, has done an outstanding job, and they allowed reputational smears. And make no question, politics was at play here, because this came from within, like the VA and people on the inside, a couple of them trying to smear the reputation of this fine doctor, this admiral, with no regard to what it would do to his reputation, his career, and his life. Faceless, nameless. It's not something innocent saying they just came forward to be able to trust their senators. This is about protecting other people that want to preserve their job within the VA. So this is the swamp at its murkiest, disgusting worst.
Well, you can't say that the American Legion is part of the swamp unless you might want to. But American Legion people said they didn't. I mean, that's like 20% of the veterans said they don't approve of this.
I'm not talking about that's an approval question, not a specific allegation question.
Right. And so, Greg, this is why we don't have good people in D.C. working, because it's, you get smeared or you have to have political experience.
Yeah, but you have to be a certain person if you are nominated in a Republican administration, a better person than if you were nominated in a Democratic administration. Because when you're in a Republican administration, it's 2 against 1. It's Democrats and the media. Yep. If you're being nominated in a Democratic administration, the math is all you got to worry about is the Republicans, because the media doesn't care. They're not going to waste their time with you. They're happy that you're there. And I'm always sympathetic. Even if there were questions about Jackson, I'm always sympathetic to the target, because the target is never perfect. He or she is always human. Mm-hmm. And they live a life as a human. They don't live a life as a perfect person, because they're never really thinking that they're going to be president.
And there's no such thing as a perfect person, except Dana Perino.
I just want to...
No, and Jasper.
I just think that the problem we're seeing right now is we're seeing achievement moderated by the mob. Fewer people are going to want to do this sort of thing. They'd rather just keep their head down to avoid getting whacked.
That's true, and he got whacked pretty hard.
I don't disagree with anything that anyone has said. If I could just make a couple of points. I'm very fond of Dr. Jackson.
Yes.
Know him well. I do think that the Republicans and the conservatives for years have used media bias as a crutch. And it is true. There is bias. So that's why you have to just be smarter than them. And I do think that if they had just asked the president to give them 24 hours to just run this by a couple of people and really talk to Dr. Jackson and understand, are you sure you really want to go through this? Is there anything that could possibly come up? Talk to a couple of senators. Then they wouldn't have had this situation today. And as to obstruction, I agree there are some problems. But today the president got confirmed his Secretary of State, Rick Grinnell, the ambassador to Germany. 19 total people got confirmed today under the leadership of Mitch McConnell for the president. There is some responsibility to put forward nominees that you think can get approved. Unless you want to have nomination fights. Nomination fights can help you politically, but if you really want to help solve the problem, you got to actually put forward people that can get confirmed and are willing to go through the process. May I make a recommendation for a possible nominee for VA Secretary? Former Senator Dr. Tom Coburn of Oklahoma. I think that there would be no question about him as qualifications. I don't think there'd be any question about him getting confirmed. Former senators usually do get confirmed.
I would say, what about Merrick Garland?
There goes
Merrick Garland. That's obstruction, isn't it?
The trial balloon that Dana just floated. The president is telling Fox News about his new connection with Kanye West that has everybody talking. Greg takes it on next.
It's day 5 of the Kanye apocalypse. And just as predicted, if you step out of the box, the others still in jail will turn on you.
So now Donald Trump has 2 black friends. I hope Ben Carson doesn't get jealous.
Like, I don't even know what happened here. I think Kanye West just realized he's too rich to not be Republican. I don't even know what it is.
We have the right to independent thought, and I independently think that Kanye has lost his mind.
What an overreaction. You'd think the guy advocated for child marriage. But it's just like high school, isn't it? The person who won't act like everyone else gets the shaft. Isn't it odd that Hollywood lectures us on bullying and diversity, but when it comes right down to it, they're groupthink enforcers intolerant of individuality? So why is that? It's the curse, again, of identity politics, which puts the group before the person. Also behind the mockery is a fear that their target might be onto something, and the mockers are being left behind. When someone dares to be different in a way that comes with a cost, you either reevaluate your own choices or seek to silence him or her. Which leads me to another criticism, that those on the right lauding Kanye would rip him apart if his comments were left-wing. What if it was about needing more gun control? It's actually a fair point, except it misses the big picture. What Kanye's doing, unlike that position, isn't a reflection of the same conventional assumptions that gets great press. No, this is a daring move because it goes against that very tide. Thus, it's one that costs you capital, support from your entertainment pals, and even record sales. He didn't join a parade. He left a prison, and he's paying for it. But maybe that's why Kanye did it. He realized that he could absorb the slings and arrows that others couldn't.
Exactly.
Who does that remind you of?
True.
And not Donald Trump.
Me?
Yes, you just.
I like the heat.
I was going to say it was going to rhyme with Jesus. It rhymes with Jesus.
Okay.
Anyway, you want to hear what Donald Trump had to say? It's pretty.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're comparing
No, I'm saying, yeah, he suffered the slings. He is risking himself for the good of others.
I mean, I was like with you all the way. Jesus.
No, I find it, I mean, people talk about looking for people who are Christ-like. The guy's willing to sacrifice a lot of himself for others.
Kanye died
you
for
can
our
laugh at
sins.
it.
Of himself,
I welcome the laughter because I'm also sacrificing myself.
Yeah.
You don't even believe in Jesus.
Well, I don't. Maybe.
He believes in Jesus, though.
Jesus.
Jesus. All right, now
And
This is too much.
I know.
I mean,
I did that for you, Juan. I did that for you.
You put him over the edge.
I did.
Well done,
I'm
well
pushing
done.
him.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
Okay.
Let's go to this. Donald Trump talking about Kanye.
I get along with Kanye. I get along with a lot of people, frankly. But Kanye looks and he sees black unemployment at the lowest it's been in the history of our country, okay? He sees that stuff, and he's smart. And he says, you know what? Trump is doing a much better job than the Democrats did. When I see a Kanye sticking to his guns, or when I see others, and there are plenty of others, sticking to their guns and coming out and saying it.
Dana?
Well, you know, one of the things that I've learned today is that your point about getting kicked out of your tribe is that, do you know that he was actually, they said that Kanye was part of the alt-right.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, this is preposterous that he's part of the alt-right. And you know how I feel about him in terms of the past. And I'm willing to let it go. Conservatives have been saying similar things for many, many years. Sometimes in terms of politics and public policy, timing is everything. This is an opening, and if President Trump can take it, go for it.
That's the thing. It feels like a possibility for something. Jesse.
I mean, I hate to take issue with the president of the United States. I doubt Kanye is looking at black unemployment and saying, you know what, it's the Trump tax cut policy. I just think Kanye likes controversy.
Yeah.
And Kanye likes to, like, move outside of the box. And it works. He's an independent thinker. He's not afraid to take the slings and arrows. This is not about politics. Kanye's admitted he's not a Republican. He's not a Democrat. I think he honestly just likes Trump.
Well, what's wrong with that?
I think he respects Trump, and he likes him, and he's not afraid to get out of that lane and say he likes the guy, and he's not going to listen to the mob say you have to hate this guy. He respects individuality, and when an individual gets out of line, the mob comes down and slams you. He's been called mentally ill. He's been called a sellout. He's been called everything. They've been mocking him on late night. He doesn't care, though. And I think that's what makes Kanye different. It makes him have that dragon energy. The way that Trump has.
Can I just throw that? This is a tweet from Chance the Rapper. Black people don't have to be Democrats. All right, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be Republicans, Juan, but isn't it, could you interpret that tweet as saying that he wants the Democrats to improve their party? Do not take us for granted.
Sure, so don't ignore us as Republicans do, don't take for granted. That's the old saying. But in the case of Kanye West, this guy, I mean, you know, he said that while Obama called him a jerk for his being rude to Taylor Swift, and like, oh, when he was in the hospital, when he was addicted to opioids, who invited him? It was Donald Trump.
Right.
So that's the basis. There's no policy. There's no substance. So when you talk about getting out of the box,
what's wrong with that?
Well, there is a little substance. He said, "What has Obama done for Chicago?"
Oh my gosh, he's done nothing. So this is when it comes to substance. This guy has nothing. This is a guy, in fact, who said Cosby was innocent. This is a guy who condemned George W. Bush. You guys are suddenly flocking to him because it's convenient. But why you would take him seriously, I have no idea.
Well, you know what? I don't. Why wouldn't you take him seriously?
Because he's not a serious person. He's like a provocateur.
That's your opinion, but he's actually a serious businessman, and he's hugely successful. No, you don't know, because I don't think you're very familiar with his background.
I don't care about business. We're talking politics. He's endorsing a president.
And he's entitled to have his opinion, like anybody is.
Build it.
No,
Say
you're
something.
trying to diminish him because what? He's a
I'm not diminishing him. The guy was in the hospital. He says the basis is that Trump asked him to come over.
So that's a basis to totally disregard and just debase an individual to say that they had mental illness problems, so they should be discounted in their opinion. I just think that's a very myopic, short-sighted viewpoint, and it's not very fair. He's somebody that you should say, listen, go ahead and say what you want to say. Give your opinion. He was invited over to Trump Tower. He was at the transition, and they had a meeting. Maybe they did talk about business. Maybe they did talk about immigration.
What they talked about.
You don't know. You're not a mind reader, and you weren't there.
This is a matter that seems to me to be so trivial. But again, in the era of people being shot at Waffle House,
I stick up for people's rights to express themselves.
Now we're talking about Waffle House. We got to move on. All right. The president had a lot more to say about his fired FBI director after watching James Comey on TV last night. Hear that? The 5 returns.
President Trump unleashing on fired FBI Director Jim Comey after watching his town hall last night.
Comey is a leaker and he's a liar. And not only on this stuff, he's been leaking for years. He did an illegal act, and he said it himself, in order to get a special counsel against me. So Comey leaked, and by the way, also, what he did with CNN in order to placate them, you saw that whole scenario. This is a big mistake, this book. He is guilty of crimes. He did a great thing for the American people by firing him.
Comey sounded off once again on the president's call to lock him up.
That is not okay. This is the United States of America. The president of the United States is saying that, forget me, saying that lots of private citizens shall be in jail, should be in jail, must be in jail. That is not okay, given our commitment to the rule of law.
Oh my gosh. In a little over a half hour from now, Bret Baier will sit down with the director on Special Report. You don't want to miss it. So that's going to be fantastic. Yes, Greg?
I want Bret to ask him this question: did he change his book on the publisher's request? Because I think the real story that would have made Comey honorable is talking about why he did the right thing regarding Anthony Weiner, why the days before the election, why he allowed that information out there, which hurt Comey, but he did it for the country. Instead, and that's a great book. And instead, his publisher said Trump sells.
So okay.
I think he changed. I wanted to ask him if he changed the book.
I still don't think that would make him honorable. Let's be honest.
He did the right thing with Weiner.
Well, okay. Well,
and that's a book. No one's done that book yet.
Memos out, giving up classified information.
Call me.
Disseminating it to 2 individuals, not just his professor at Columbia, also not telling the truth when he was testifying about that professor's classification that had some FBI clearance. Oh, and then he gave it to another individual. Dana.
I don't know. I don't know what to say. I know this. I play a little game with myself. Like, how fast can I get home? Walking as fast as I can in order to see Special Report.
Or you could stay here and watch it.
And your gait is very small.
That's right, but I walk fast.
No, she's
like in a sped up movie.
Yeah.
She's fast and furious. She goes really quick and she wears sensible shoes. I would never go in a walking contest against her. Jesse.
I would ask, he leaked these memos in order to trigger a special counsel to look into his firing. I would say, what makes you think you're that special? That you're going to put the country through this because you got fired? Hillary would have fired you before Trump. I didn't say that word. I would also ask, you put forward an unsubstantiated dossier into a FISA judge, knowing it was unsubstantiated, unverified. Because he knew it was unverified, because he told the president when he met with him it was unverified. And then he's later admitted it was unverified in the book. So why did you put that to the judge knowing it was not verified? And number 2, why did you proffer Steele as a credible witness when you already had known he had lied and leaked? I would ask those 3 things. I know Brett's watching.
Oh, my gosh. Brett, please take notes from Jesse Waters. Okay, Juan.
Well, I mean, clearly he didn't break the law. Everybody said this. The documents weren't classified. So the issue here is his behavior around the Trump investigation and the Hillary investigation. So I would come back to the issue of why did you decide to make news about the Hillary investigation and not announce that you were investigating Trump for the Russia coordination collusion with the campaign. And of course, the big answer, and I think this is the big news out of the Comey book, is he thought Hillary was going to win. So why is politics all of a sudden in your bailiwick, Mr. Comey? Why are you suddenly judge and jury for the American people and essentially put Trump in the White House?
Yeah, well, once the IG report is released, we'll see if, in fact, that Comey and McCabe are going to be prosecuted. And it's not clear-cut that it was unclassified, totally false, and he used it for his own purposes to benefit for his book, to make money. Bad. Another twist in the bizarre blog drama involving MSNBC host Joy Reid coming up.
MSNBC has a problem. One of its stars wrapped up in a scandal, and it just keeps getting stranger. Host Joy Reid apologized in December for homophobic posts on her old blog. Now she's claiming to be the victim of hacking after a new batch of damaging posts were unearthed. Her attorney says the FBI has opened an investigation. Reid could be in legal trouble, though, if her claims are not true. In the meantime, MSNBC sticking by the embattled anchor. Greg, what do you make of this?
Well, you know what? There's no statute of limitations for stupidity, and I think that's wrong. I think we need it. I want to give you 3 examples. One of the great voices against white supremacy, a guy named Kristen Piccolini, was once a leading white supremacist. One of the great critics of radical Islamic extremism was once a radical Islamist. That was Maajid Nawaz. One of the great experts in fraud and identity theft was a notorious fraudster who served time in many prisons. That's Frank Abagnale. My point is, people can see they're wrong and people can change. And I would think with Joy that would happen, although I doubt she would extend the same courtesy to us. But what do? When they go low, we go high. Exactly. Most of us. And right now I am high.
Hey, Dana, though, Chris Butler with the Internet Archives looked back and said there's no evidence that any of her tweets or posts were manipulated.
Right. So I will always defend her right to say anything, her right to change her mind. But if she lied about it to try to cover it up, that's actually more harmful to society. If we encourage people to hide what they actually believe or to hide that they have evolved in their beliefs, then that's terrible for civilization. So I would defend her, but I hope she didn't lie about it.
Go low, Jesse.
You want me to go low? Sure.
How low can you go?
I would say, I would agree that I think it's 10 years has passed since this, and she's apologized for offensive comments. She can get over this. It seems like the media is more out for blood than the audience. I'm not really sure the audience really cares. Her ratings have been good. I mean, she's overcome CNN in the first quarter this year in her time slot. That's never happened before. So they're sitting on a pretty talented person over there for them. Still a battle for second place, let's be clear. The interesting issue is that NBC faces sort of a Sophie's choice. You have a black female anchor who has offended gay and lesbians. So whatever decision they make with her, if they cut her, they keep her, they're going to affect a prominent, part of their audience. I'm not sure what they're going to do. We'll see. Their credibility, though, is at stake because she actually said in one of these posts that she liked Trump, thought he was funny, and sided with Trump over Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh, now she's going to get fired for sure.
I mean,
look at how happy Jesse
that's
is.
blasphemous. If you're a Democrat.
Nail in the coffin.
So you have, she doesn't like straight haircuts on women. She doesn't like Rosie O'Donnell. She's disgusted by gay kissing. What do you say?
Okay, well, listen, she better hope the FBI comes up with a really good forensic report and analysis because they can determine this and figure out if she did. And if she didn't, then she's no credibility. If she lied about it, it's a huge, huge problem. Then she owns those comments. And so now the problem is the lefts always want to say I got hacked or it's the alt-right or it's something. So truth coming home. Let's see what it's.
Fact is, we are giving her a lot of support that she wouldn't give us. Media Matters would be after us in a second.
Right. And the FBI is actually wasting time digging into this. Are you serious?
Well, get ready for some laughs. How about that? One more thing is up next.
Hopefully it's time for one more thing, Greg.
It's time for Greg's Take Your Child to Work Day. As you know, it's Take Your Child to Work today, so I brought my little baby with me. Yes, 8 pounds, 3 ounces. Isn't he adorable? His name is the Gutfeld Monologues. And you know what? If you want to take a look at him, you can order him at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or go to SimonandSchuster.com and check out my little baby. Oh, look at his face.
You got all your baby pictures up there?
Yes, and he's got his teeth.
This is your 8th child.
This is my 8th one. I believe it's my 8th or my 9th.
You're looking good for it, too.
Thank you.
All right, KG.
Yeah, that was interesting. All right, for the second year in a row, President Trump hosted Wounded Warriors at the White House, and so it was very memorable. Today's event kickstarts the annual Soldier Ride, which is a 4-day bike ride to inspire and empower veterans and service members with physical and psychological wounds of war. The president saying earlier that the U.S. was in eternal debt of every service member standing with him today. So it's quite moving if you were able to see this, and it's a true reminder of the service and sacrifices of our nation's bravest, the men and women that serve us. God bless them all. And we said earlier, congratulations to our new ambassador to Germany, Rick Grinnell.
Okay, Jesse.
New edition of Mom Text. First up. Be so careful, Jesse. Trump will be impeached if he fires Mueller. We live in a country of laws, capitalized. Number 2, obviously Dana has balanced sources, Jesse. Your interpretation of the Nothing Burger is not only pitiful, but inaccurate and woven from tattered cloth.
Oh, wow.
Jesse, you used to read voraciously. What happened? An occasional novel would be in your very best interest. Number 4, stop it right now. You are being obnoxious to your co-host who are you?
That's an evergreen.
And finally, I'm going to ask that you pick up the Comey book, A Higher Loyalty. Please do this for your mother. All right, Mom.
Did you get around to that yet?
I picked it up and I put it
gifts. I have gifts for my One More Thing. I got a note today from Sandra Malenfant. Sandra Malenfant of Brown Hills, New Jersey. She has a dog named Abby. This woman quilted all of these gifts for us, and they're very unique to everyone. You get the unicorn pillow.
Nice.
I got the dog bag with Jasper. Kimberly, you get a fairy